So it's time to get started with our 5 very immensely talented individuals who are participating in who participated in the making of A Call to Spy. We've just spent a delightful 15 minutes with them before you all came in, and we encourage you to pose questions to them via the chat. We have muted everybody who's not speaking, but we do really look forward to this being interactive and having your questions in chat. So, moderating tonight's discussion, we have Dr. John Bruns, who is professor and director of film studies here at College of Charleston. A little bit about John. His book, Loopholes Reading Comically, is currently out in paperback with a new introduction. So congratulations on that, John. He recently published a book on Alfred Hitchcock, and he's working on a book on the films of Steven Spielberg. When's that going to be out, John?
Oh, books take a very long time. It's still gestating.
Okay, well, that's a good answer. So John will be the moderator for our wonderful, talented crew and cast here from A Call to Spy. And I'm just going to give you a little blurb about each of them since we have so many people participating today, and then I'll turn it over to John. First of all, we have Sarah Megan Thomas, who played Virginia Hall. She's an actress, producer, and writer. Sarah wrote the original screenplay for A Call to Spy. She plays Virginia Hall, and she produced the film. Sarah's previous feature was the groundbreaking Equity, for which she created the concept, co-wrote the story, produced and co-starred. Equity is the first female-driven Wall Street thriller. Sarah has also appeared on many television shows and off-Broadway productions as an actress. She's a graduate of Williams College, and she trained at the Drama Studio in London. Next, we have Lydia Dean Pilcher, the director, who is a very well-known American film and television director and producer, the founder of Cinemosaic, which is a leading independent production company. She's a 2-time Emmy Award winner and Academy Award nominated producer of over 40 feature films and has worked with auteur directors including Wes Anderson and Catherine Bigelow. We have Laila Robins, who plays Noor's mother, Pirani. She is an American stage, film, and television actress. She continues her prolific career in stage and screen. Among her many roles, she was the U.S. ambassador to Pakistan and Homeland. I definitely remember that one, Laila. Thank you. And in Treatment, they're both based on Israeli shows, by the way. And she also starred in Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, and she earned her MFA at the Yale School of Drama. And representing an academic institution, I did feel that I had to talk about the wonderful academic pedigrees that all these wonderful people. Andrew Richardson plays Alfonse. This is Andrew's first major film role, which he landed pretty quickly, straight out of college. He graduated 2.5 years ago with a BFA from Carnegie Mellon School of Drama. That's my hometown, Andrew, so thank you for that. And we look forward to seeing him in future movies and shows. Marc Rissman, I was supposed to lift my hands for that one to get the German. He plays Klaus Barbie, and he is also an actor and director. He studied at the College of Dramatic Arts in Berlin and is known for his stage and many series roles, including the 2019 8th season of Game of Thrones, Man in a High Castle, and The Last Kingdom. So you can see we have a really star-studded bunch of people here today. A little bit too much for me, so I'm going to turn it over to John.
Thank you, Sandra, and welcome to everyone, especially our distinguished guests. And I guess I'd like to start off by asking Sarah if she could talk a little bit about sort of process you went through from idea to writing the script and getting the funding and to the first day of shooting.
Wow, well, that's a 1-hour question. So I'll give you the close notes. Basically, as a filmmaker, I start with the genre. So I start big picture, something that's commercial that I think I can raise money for, that I think audience members want to watch. And then I look at it with a female lens of what's missing. So as Sandra mentioned, my last film was the first female-driven Wall Street movie. Wall Street movies make profits but we hadn't seen it from a female lens. And that was, I raised the money from people on Wall Street. So with this film, I knew I wanted to tell a spy thriller. I love James Bond, I love Charlotte Gray, but at the heart, they're really romances when the women are involved. And I was really interested in uncovering the psychology of what it must have been like to be a spy on the ground as a woman. And I had studied World War II at Williams College, and I knew that there were female spies, but that was really where it started. And then when I dug under the hood and found these three women, Vera Atkins, Virginia Hall, and Noor Inayat Khan, who were kind of firsts in their profession as spies in Churchill's secret army. And then when I uncovered that no movie had been made about them, that was kind of the aha moment that this kind of movie has to be made. And then really quickly, the fundraising, my last movie did make a profit, so I had a lot of investors come back. This is a larger budget. And so, it required more fundraising, but it was from people within the spy genre or the Indian American community who wanted to see Noor's story or some reason that they invested. And then I found Lydia. Did I get all that in?
Yes. In fact, that's wonderful. Thank you. Informative answer, and also a great segue, because I wanted to ask Lydia. That's from what I understand, you were shooting in a couple of locations. Can you tell us a little bit about what it was like to shoot in Budapest? If you have any memorable anecdotes from that location.
Sure. We mounted the production in both Philadelphia and Budapest, and Budapest was a location that I felt really it was kind of the key turning for setting up our exterior French world. I had gone to Lyon early on a scouting trip just to go to all the places that our female spies had been to, and kind of tried to walk in their shoes and really experience what the world was like for them, moving around in this kind of geography. And then I went to Budapest and felt like we could very much replicate that world of 1940s Lyon. And it's an amazing city, and even there are quite a number of amazing things there, from the synagogue and the stories that emanate from the war. And we really constructed that time in the war, which was before, it was before America had come into the war. Then America came into the war, and Klaus Barbie came to Lyon as the Gestapo chief to really, at this point, trying to sort of take out all of the resistance members. Virginia Hall was very much on his hit list. So really using Budapest as the backdrop to set up the telling of this very specific critical time in the war was amazing.
Okay. It's interesting, when I watched it, Sarah, you'd mentioned spy films, James Bond films. And I do mean this very sincerely. When I watched it, I kept thinking of, and I hope some people are aware of this film, Roberto Rossellini's Rome Open City. And I was wondering if, apart from, say, James Bond films, and then Sarah and Lydia, both of you, if you want to answer, were there other films that inspired you? Maybe you asked cast members to watch or to keep an eye out for?
Mm-hmm. Well, the film that really inspired me deeply was Army of Shadows by Jean-Pierre Melville. He was, he was a new wave filmmaker. He was a resistance member himself, and the Army of Shadows was based on a novel by a resistance fighter. And what I liked about it, or what I was very moved by about it, was how he created that existential feeling of terror and fear in weaving the story without being overly gratuitous, about the violence. And he also just had a beautiful cinematic style. It's different from my style, but I liked the way that it worked on a psychological level.
And for me, I would say it was Son of Saul and Life is Beautiful. And the reason I mentioned those two films, which actually have male leads, but the point being that it's about the psychology of the human being. And when you watch those movies, you really care if they live or if they die. And that really is the drama and the thriller aspect of this screenplay, which is, will they or won't they die after they're told they have a 50-50 chance of survival?
Yeah, those statistics at the very end of the film were gut-wrenching to read. And it does suggest, and I think anyone who's watched this film, Sarah, appreciates probably the enormous amount of research that went into this. And there was one detail that I noticed about 50 minutes in, and I'm always looking at these little details, and you can tell me if I'm reading too much into it. But there's a lunch scene between I'm trying to get my notes here to have this right. Yes. So Virginia and the doctor are having lunch, and I noticed that on their plates they're just eating potatoes. And I was wondering if that was just just something you thought, well, put anything on the plates, or were you thinking, no, this is in the war. They're going to have a very humble kind of lunch. This is not going to be, an elaborate feast during these times of austerity. Are those little decisions in there as well?
Yeah, I mean, that's in the script. It says potatoes. And it was there are a lot of details that are kind of heavily researched and might not, the viewer might not pick up on as you did, which I love that you picked that up. I did a screening for CIA personnel last week because Virginia Hall was the first woman to work for the CIA after the war. And it was hosted by Randy Burkett, who's their chief historian. And actually he said, which is I think the biggest compliment you could get, was that he doesn't think people will realize how historically accurate this film is in the details, like what you mentioned. So all of it is carefully plotted. And then when I diverted from fact, so for example, Nor and Virginia never met. They were 2 years apart in the war, and I put them together in time and space as roommates in training. It was for a purpose. It was to explore this global theme of women from different backgrounds and religions who kind of united to resist a common evil, and their diversity is what proved critical to the success of their mission. So there was a point diverting from fact when we did, as opposed to just to divert.
Thank you. I did get a really interesting question via email from Andrea Losbin. I think I'm pronouncing that correctly. And it's a question I guess I can, again, direct to Sarah. I've noticed in the chat that a lot of people have come across the biography of Virginia Hall, A Woman of No Importance. The question is, Sarah, were you touched by Virginia Hall's not wanting public acknowledgement of her work?
Absolutely. I mean, that was part of the challenge of playing the role. She never gave any interviews. She didn't talk to her family about the internal of what it was like to be a spy. She was a spy. This actually is an original screenplay. It's not based on A Woman of No Importance, which came out after the film shot. In fact, there are 2 new books on Virginia Hall out now, and a new one that I just got sent that's coming out in February. So it's really fantastic. Yeah, that starts when our movie ends, interestingly enough. But it's just really fantastic that she's coming to light in the way that she should, as are the other 2 leads in this movie. Because these are women who are not in our history books, yet they've won every award you can imagine for bravery and courage, and they really should be.
Yeah. And I'm surprised that her dream of becoming a diplomat was not realized based on her bravery and her brilliance.
Yeah, I think one of the most inspiring things for me, why I hooked into her and wanted to write and play her, is that she was a woman who didn't take no for an answer. Day in and day out, she was discriminated against because of her disability and because she was a woman. And she was told, no, you can't be a diplomat, even though you're overqualified. And then she went on to spy for the British and became the spy the Nazis historically dubbed the most dangerous of all. And then after the war, she got denied from being a diplomat. She said, you know what? Okay, I'm going to go work for the CIA. And I just love that about her, that she found a way to take the no's and turn them into yeses in ways that, benefited society.
It's a fascinating life. Let me shift over to some of our talent here. Andrew Richardson, you played Alfonse. This is your first major role. Can you tell us a little bit about how it came about that you would play the role of Alfonse?
Well, it was, I just got out of school and moved to New York, and it was one of the earlier auditions, and it was in person, which is always nice, instead of via self-tape, which is how things have really kind of moved. The thing that sticks out in my memory the most of that experience was Lydia did one of my favorite things that a director can ever do in an audition room, which is to allow me to kind of improvise with it and go off script, which someone coming from theatre I greatly appreciated and had a lot of fun with. So that's kind of how I joined initially.
And we've been asking Sarah and Lydia about research. Marc, could you tell us a little bit about whatever research that might have gone into your role as Klaus Barbie?
Well, of course, I read a lot about Klaus Barbie and biography and what he was known for. I had a feeling in this movie, because I'm very present in 1.5 scenes, basically, and it's represented for that regime and that sadism and everything. It is also a certain energy, basically. It's more on a personal level, what you can show. How does a man gets joy from seeing pain or something like that, manipulation. So it was more understanding that psychology and what war and power does to a broken individual who goes beyond that then and covers it up. So of course, you know all the facts and everything. This is not a Klaus Barbie movie. He's part of that whole world. But in that moment, I hope he's present.
And Laila, you play the mother of Noor. Really a beautiful performance and very powerful at the very end. Did you channel anything in trying to accept and understand that moment when you learned the news of your daughter?
Yes, I did. I did personalize it from an experience in my own life. I'm not sure I'm going to share it, but I did have a moment in my own life and history that I could draw on for that moment. And the reason I wanted to take the role was because of that sort of bookend aspect of the character. I really only have 2 scenes, the very beginning of the film and at the end, but that final scene is very powerful, and I thought that would be a really wonderful challenge. And I was so impressed with the script that Sarah had written, and I'd always wanted to work with Lydia, so it was a great opportunity for all of that to happen.
Well, thank you for sharing that. I guess this next question is for everyone involved, but I'll ask Lydia and Sarah maybe to start us off. Why are these stories so important to tell?
Well, I think my first and most obvious answer is that every single person that Sarah and I talked to says, we've never heard this story before. And it's kind of shocking. I think in London, where the special operations executive is more well known, and the fact that there were 39 women that went into France as SOE agents is more well known and is starting to be more celebrated. But in America, we haven't, Virginia Hall's portrait is in the lobby of the CIA, and you can see Cuthbert, her residual limb and the wooden leg, but they're not stories that we, learned from our history books. And I think what we're kind of in this moment of cultural reckoning in our country, that there has been a lens of history that has left a lot of voices and a lot of perspectives behind. And it's exciting to be part of, a trend now where these voices are being discovered and their stories are being told in ways that people are learning about them for the first time.
And I agree with everything Lydia just said. I mean, I think it takes more diverse voices of all kinds, women, but all kinds of diversity to want to tell these stories and to actually write them and produce them, and hire female directors, of course, but not enough of the discussion started about, it has to happen earlier. You have to have the idea, the concept to make everything happen.
Mm-hmm.
And do you find that I understand that there are certain national cinemas that are really stepping up efforts to make sure that opportunities to direct, to write, to produce are available to all For instance, in Ireland, there is an effort to, I think it's, I'm trying to find my notes once more again, sorry. It's Screen Ireland's 6-point plan to ensure that it's sometime in the next 5 years or so, it's basically a 50-50 arrangement for both men and women. And I believe in 2017, 7 out of 10 Irish films had a female protagonist. Sarah, you had mentioned that you love spy films, but you never really see strong female leads. Do you see, I don't know if there's anything like that here in the United States, but do you see efforts like that to open up these opportunities?
Absolutely, but I would say yes and no. In other words, there are a lot more opportunities. There's a lot more programs and grants, and but what there's not, and there is better, I think, internationally, is money. So what do I mean by that? Like when I took this film to a festival in Canada, I was doing a panel, and I learned that as a first-time filmmaker in Canada, you can get from the government $1 million to make your film, and that was just like, what? But equal access to money to people starting out who don't have the resources is what we need to kind of level the playing field so that everyone can benefit, because it really is hard to get started.
Yeah, thank you. Lydia, did you want to add to that?
I think there's a lot of programs in Hollywood that are recognizing the need to be more inclusive in how stories are told. That means who's telling the story on both sides of the camera. And I think that I think we are in a moment of change right now. It takes a while for, you know, for an industry to catch up and the people who have been kind of counted out for so long to be brought back in. But it's happening. It is happening. I think it's inevitable. I mean, the demographics of our country are shifting. Millennials are, you know, a third of the population. It's a very diverse population, and that is going to be reflected in what we see in our culture going forward.
Yes. I got a little nudge from Sandra. I'd like to actually call on, is Ashley Walters here? I'm expecting that she might have a question she'd like to ask. Kim, if you could help us out there.
Hi, everyone. I'm so sorry I can't be on the screen right now. I'm wrangling my 2 very small children alone, but I really enjoyed the film. It was beautiful. I loved watching it. I did want to ask Sarah, and I think you've already touched upon this a bit with your comments already, but I know you wanted to portray remarkable women in a spy in World War II thriller. Yeah. I'm struck that you also decided to portray a woman of color and a Muslim through the character of Noor. And you also took on images of able-bodiedness, which is something I think that's pretty prevalent in Hollywood, through the character of Virginia. And so I wondered to what extent, because there were, of course, 39 other women you could have, or I guess 37 other women you could have portrayed, were these factors you took into consideration when you decided to focus on these 2 particular women? And thank you.
Sure, great question. I have 2 young children too, so when I turn here, that's where I'm looking. But anyway, yeah, definitely. I wanted to, any of these women, any of these 39 women can and should have biopics made on them, because they deserve for their life stories to be told in a more complete way than is possible in a 2-hour film. But the reason that I chose Virginia Hall, Vera Atkins, and Noor Nayat Khan for this 3-hander is because they were not only from different backgrounds and different religions, as you mentioned, you know, Vera was Jewish, Noor was Muslim, you know, Virginia was not really practicing, but Catholic Protestant, but also because they were from different countries and they united to resist this common evil. In addition to that, these 3 women were firsts in their respective fields. So Virginia was the first female field agent, Vera was the first female wireless, and Noor was the first female wireless, and Vera was the first and only female recruiter in charge of finding these women. So they were pioneers. And so I thought they were a natural fit as opposed to kind of a forced fit, if that makes any sense.
I encourage everyone who is participating with us to, if you do have a question, feel free to pose it in chat, and we can sort of keep track of them and find you somewhere here in our Zoom window. So I encourage that. Sarah, the preparation to play Virginia is obviously not only one that requires some historical perspective and research, but there's a physical demand too. Could you talk a little bit about playing a role such as Virginia's, your protagonist with a disability?
Sure. That was obviously the physical challenge of the role. Playing this character who had a wooden leg. She wasn't born with it. She actually shot her leg off when she was 27 in a tragic hunting accident, and was in pain for the rest of her life, and walked with a wooden leg. So for me, I did a lot of research. I met with a prosthesis specialist in New York, who showed me the old prostheses of the 30s and 40s and how they were made for men, interestingly enough. So they didn't fit. So they were too big. So there were blisters all the time. So constant pain, constant uncomfort. And her family kind of corroborated that. But then also her need to hide it. She didn't want people to feel sorry for her. So she didn't want you to know she had a limp. Yet the Germans called her the limping lady. So how do you balance those two things and merge those two things? So as an actress and a writer, I decided to underplay the limp. I felt, it's better to underplay than overplay. And what I would do is constantly walk with this limp basically for 6 months. So even if you couldn't see it, even if I was acting with, Laila or Marc, we didn't have any scenes together, Andrew, but anyone, next film, but anyone, I would be wearing some kind of device on my leg and practicing the limp. I will say, we had some heavy footwear on my leg to begin with, which we transitioned out of because it got too much. But I did rupture my Achilles tendon from playing the role and couldn't walk myself for a year after shooting, which was a whole nother journey, and gave me a whole new respect for Virginia Hall. When you're in a wheelchair and people look at you a certain way when you're a confident person. So I always have, and my leg will never be the same. So I have a little bit of Virginia Hall with me forever.
And I wanted to turn to our other actors, but I'm going to be very selfish here, and Sarah, hog you just a little bit more, and Lydia as well, because you mentioned that obviously this disability is visible, and yet you didn't want it to be a defining feature of Virginia. And it reminds me of a moment in the film. She's just had a conversation with Noor, and she turns and goes up the stairs. And what I appreciated, what I liked, and the camera is filming her from behind as she goes up the stairs. You cut after just 2 steps. I would think that any other filmmaker would probably say, let's have a longer take here so we can watch her struggle up the stairs. But you didn't do that. And I thought that was really interesting, Lydia, I guess in collaboration with your editor. Were you making decisions like that with Sarah? Or is this all scripted? Did you have conversations about how you're going to handle this disability?
Yeah, definitely. We talked about it a lot because I think it. I think, and on the one hand, you could say she's not defined by it, but on the other hand, you can say she is. It's, and we worked with a company, Respectability, who advises films who are portraying people with disabilities, and it was helpful. It very much defined, I think, the emotional arc for Virginia's character, because it, doing what she was doing meant so much to her, and she was being denied that opportunity because of her disability. So I think, we didn't want, I think what you were going for was that we didn't want people to get sidetracked by that, but you always wanted to be aware of it, and you wanted to kind of understand that it never actually left her. I couldn't believe that Virginia Hall could get on a bicycle and ride from the city of Lyon out to the country and back and forth as part of her daily routine. And that was one of the things I wanted to see when I went to scout, like, how is that possible? But these things are possible, but with great difficulty. Yeah. But John, I wanted to say one thing, because we've got these amazing actors on the Zoom with us, and they are all just astonishing in their own ways. And they all have smaller parts in the movie, but they're parts that command great actors to pull it off. And you know, I think with Marc, to play a character like Klaus Barbie, you don't want you don't want a caricature or a version. You want someone who is a human being to come through with all of that sort of cruelty and nefarious, you know, side of human nature that exists. And I think Marc did that so brilliantly. And Andrew, with the character of Alfonse, I mean, he's kind of this, you know, buccaneer and this adventurer, and you know, he's got the spirit that Virginia can connect to, and they, you know, they team up. And the moment when he's executed in public on the street, and she is just, you know, inadvertently, in the timing of it all, happened to be making her decision to escape, and she couldn't even look at what was happening, but she saw enough to know that this very close colleague, what was happening, and how Andrew performs that is amazing. And Laila, I'm sorry, I just have to say these things. Laila, who I think she and I remembered that later that we had worked on Planes, Trains, and Automobiles like a gazillion years ago.
My first Hollywood movie, actually.
Yeah, but I've watched Laila on stage, on Broadway, off Broadway, in New York for years. I have been blown away time and time again by her performance. And to play Noor's mother, who was, you know, Noor was of Indian descent. Her father was a Sufi mystic. Her mother was American. And it's not a visual, you know, for a small part, a small glimpse into that part of the world, it's a visual thing that can look, okay, you have to get it. But I knew we needed like just a spectacular actress to play this part, and I knew it was Laila. So I was thrilled,
oh my goodness.
I was thrilled when she came in, because when we constructed this scene, I wanted the audience to feel that they were experiencing the scene as her mother was experiencing it. And it's such a challenging thing to accomplish. It's such a challenging thing to do. And it was also important that Noor's death be transcendental, because she was, you know, she was, of the three women, the one who was really kind of, you know, you felt the greatest sense of sort of innocence and moral imperative, and the one who had the least reason of all the women to actually be doing what she was doing. She was an idealist, and there was something pure. So that transcendental moment that you feel the light that she has, and I couldn't have done it without Radhika. I definitely couldn't have done it without Laila. So I just wanted to say that. Yeah.
Oh, thank you so much. And Laila, I wanted to ask
Thank you, Lydia.
Were you aware of this story before you read the script? Were you aware of
No, I didn't know about any of these people. I really, I'm claiming my ignorance about it, and that's what I found so fascinating about them. And I guess I was so interested because in some ways they're such unlikely, unlikely people to be these spies. I mean, as Lydia was just saying, Radhika's character is almost a pacifist in being Sufi, and she really had a higher reason for doing it. She thought she should do something for the war. She wanted the Indians living in Britain to sort of be noticed and thus more integrated into the society at that time. She had these sort of ideals. And ironically, when she was being trained in the F section, the reports on her progress in the training was saying things like, she had lack of ruse, and she gave away too much information, and she was not overburdened with brains, and really negative statements like that. And then in the end, when she's sorry, she what?
Wrote children's stories.
She started by writing. That was her life. She had no reason to leave this quite lovely life of writing children's books, and but suddenly sort of rose to the occasion. And then when she was incarcerated and tortured and beaten and put in solitary confinement, and she never gave away any of the secrets. And I guess, the only thing she said at the end before they shot her was the word liberté. But to know that you don't expect necessarily that these people have that stuff inside them. And that's what's so thrilling about the film, is that it's the unexpected quality of these ladies that it was really stunning. And the way we shot that, it's kind of a spoiler alert. I don't know, Lydia, about the last scene. where I learn of Nora's death, my daughter's death. It was so wonderful in the script that you worked out with Sarah and Lydia together. I don't know where the idea came from, but the sadness of hearing that news was done behind a closed door, which was so effective. So all you really hear is my scream. You don't actually, film the woman falling apart because of the death of her daughter, but it was just so powerful in that way. And really the scream was reading on Sarah's face and on Vera's face. Yeah. And just to say that
opening scream though, Laila, I've been in live audiences where people, like pre-pandemic festival audiences, people like, who was that woman? Oh my God, I got chills at that scream.
I'm a screamer, I guess. That's what they say. I do a lot of roles where I do a lot of screaming, actually.
Andrew, I guess I wanted to pose that same question to you. Were you aware of this story, the women spies being hired or assembled by Churchill during the war?
Well, shortly after I got cast, I actually went back to London to see family, and as part of my preparation, I met with Dr. Roderick Bailey, who's a professor at Oxford University and specialist in kind of SOE material in World War II. And so he was the first one who we had many evenings where we sat down at the pub and just kind of went over the details. And I mentioned, someone just asked this on the chat, in regards to men taking orders from women at the time. And unfortunately, as to back up what Sarah mentioned, there's not a lot written about what Virginia Hall was like to work with. However, there is a lot in terms of what it took to be a circuit leader in the SOE F section. And bottom line, they were an absolute force of nature. And I think, write a lot about just like the fear that comes in and out and what it's like to be scared there where there is nowhere to go. And the only kind of solution to that is your circuit leader. And of course, Virginia Hall was one of the biggest ones. And I'm sure there was, I think we even have a scene in there in which Rob Heaps, one of the actors, does kind of oppose Virginia. And then Alfonse kind of takes her side. And I think it really came down to respecting the absolute natural intelligence and leadership. I think, if you had it, people relied on it. So in terms of learning about it, I was really kind of just in my conversations with Roderick Bailey. And in terms of learning the training, I mean, I think a big part of it was, and this is one of my favorite parts in the film, is that they could not adjust the training for SOE agents to women. It was the same as men because it had to be the same. And I think for these women to get through that training and then get there, just, despite being told that they couldn't, that's the first remarkable thing. And then the second remarkable thing is just that they led so many men at the time who were not used to being led by women, simply because they were so damn good at their job. And I think that kind of stands for itself and it's shown pretty clearly in the film.
Absolutely. And it reflects off of you too, your character, who obviously recognizes that. And you make that part of your character and part of your interactions with Virginia. There's a question from Marc. What is it like for a German actor to portray Klaus Barbie?
Oh, well, I mean, what is it like? I mean, generally I find complicated characters very interesting and trying to understand how their mind works. And unfortunately, my country has this sad memory of history, what happened and everything. So it is, in a way, you have a responsibility to serve a character. And oh Jesus, what it is like. Honestly, shooting is fun. Lydia is brilliant, everybody else is brilliant, so the making of it is fun. And I enjoy the process quite a bit, even if it's a torturing scene. But then you just feel a little bit, you want to do good. You're in this beautiful project with these powerhouse people and believing in something, writing something, and their heart is in it. So you kind of want to give what you have to give, you know. And it is this story about Virginia, you know, and I read it, I found it absolutely fascinating because I didn't know anything about it. I knew about the Klaus Barbie part, but these little stories that come out that are so inspiring, someone going beyond something, disability, you know, and sometimes you look at yourself and think, oh, why am I not going towards the things that I want to do? Somebody else can do it with a disability. It's very inspiring. And beyond that, my wife and I were expecting a baby, and it's going to be a girl. And I cannot wait, honestly, for the moment that she's old enough so I can show her that movie and tell her that story in these circumstances. Because I've been raising myself this question, how do you raise a powerful woman, you know? And then I can tell her the story about Virginia. And then I can tell her the story about Lydia. And there was this woman called Sarah and everyone involved, you know? And I honestly cannot wait for that moment. And I will tell her what my character did at that time and what resistance it created. So I think it's just a footprint that we created to learn from it, because that's what these stories are about, and that's why it's so brilliant. You basically wrote this in the history books now and underlined it.
That's a very touching and informative answer. I appreciate that, and congratulations. And
thank you.
And speaking of strong women, we have a question, and I guess this can be to everyone, but Lydia and Sarah, can you tell us more about Vera Adkins?
Sure. Vera Atkins was actually a Romanian in background and Jewish. And she was she is the real life inspiration for Miss Moneypenny in James Bond, if there are James Bond fans out there. But she was this woman who was mysterious and much like Virginia, like, you know, didn't give interviews, you know, getting under the cover is difficult. And she was this recruiter. So she recruited all these women to be spies. But then after the war, which is not in the film, but fascinating about her personality, she spent like the rest of her life figuring out what happened to all the missing women that she sent off. And she made that her life story. So Noor, but not just Noor, because she felt they were her girls when she sent them off. And she was, you know, this was something that wasn't in an early version of the script, but I put in as we went along, the citizenship papers. That's factual, right? So she wanted her citizenship papers and they wouldn't give them to her because she was Jewish, because of anti-Semitism in London in 1941, 42. And honestly, I didn't know there was anti-Semitism in London in the early 40s, because it's not taught in your history books. And you assume, oh, they're the Allies, you know, like everyone's fine. You don't realize that the anti-Semitism was everywhere. And I thought it was a really important point that had to be in this film.
Yeah, one of there are many great lines in this film, but you gave one to Vera when at the cocktail party, when one of the guests says that there are more Jews coming into London, and I think Vera says something to the effect of, well, I guess it's not safer than here either. Just a really wonderful moment in the film.
John, I just also wanted to say that, you know, Vera's real name was Vera Rosenberg, and she had been helpful to the British while she was still in Romania. And she escaped anti-Semitism there and came to London and was recruited to work there because she had a very brilliant strategic mind, and she was recognized for that. But I think it's also interesting about our three women is that they were very educated. They were from upper middle class families. They had strong fathers who really believed in them, believed that they should be making networks and forging and sort of leading with this kind of sense of purpose. And Vera, you know, what Sarah's saying about the research and the interviews that she did after the war. I mean, I went to the Imperial War Museum in London and was researching in the archives and was able to actually hold the onion skin typed reports that she made from interviewing Nazis after the war to really kind of understand, you know, what their process was, what was happening. And, you know, she's played by Stana Katic, who is an amazing actor. People have probably seen her on ABC's Castle or the Amazon series Absentia, but she's an astonishing actor. And we had lots and lots of conversations about Vera's character, who it's not in the movie, but she was very, very involved in many Jewish resistance groups, as well as the work that she was doing for Churchill.
And I noticed here in the chat from Robbie Weinman, The Lost Girls of Paris, historical fiction by Pam Jenoff, goes into detail about Vera and the women she recruited to special operations executive.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for that. And I encourage everyone, if you do have a question, to post it in chat, and then I can pose it to whoever is relevant. There was a question a little further above about distribution. Maybe Lydia, you could talk about that.
Okay, let's see. Well, this really relates to the distributor is IFC Films, and Sarah, you might want to talk to that. It's about how is the film distributed and marketed, and were there competing strategies of optimizing viewership?
Thank you. Yeah, so this was a totally different experience. So to back up, we premiered had our world premiere in Edinburgh on the 75th anniversary of D-Day, and festivals are very important in the distribution strategy because they build word of mouth, and that's where you do sales. And we screened at London screenings right after, where I had a bunch of sales offers. And then I got a pulmonary clot from traveling to London from my Achilles rupture surgery and almost died, and ended up in a hospital for several months in the UK. So the sales actually went on hold. And so then I finally got back to the States, and had to restart, which was very difficult in the independent film world, frankly, because, to be frank, your product gets stale very quickly, and it's like, where have you been? What have you been doing? But was able to kind of, with a publicity team, like, get it back on board. That's when we did Santa Barbara and won the Anti-Defamation League Award. And that's when IFC Films came on board and bought the film. So IFC is distributing it in cinemas and on demand in the US. And then actually the offers that had given me the offers back at London screenings held, which was amazing. So Signature just released it theatrically and on demand in the UK. It'll be in theaters in Australia and New Zealand from another distributor over the holidays. And I can't tell you where, but I did just close an Amazon original international territory too. So we got a lot of distributors in different places. But IFC, I will tell you, we did have a couple offers for US, and IFC has been so innovative during the pandemic. They've been doing things no distributor's been doing in terms of pivoting with marketing, pivoting with drive-ins, still releasing films, not holding them, going in theaters where you can, which was very important to me as the producer, because this film, Lydia and I made this film for the big screen, and it's not going there in the way that we would have hoped because of the pandemic, but it is nice that in places where it's safe, that is a possibility.
That's fascinating, and I'm glad someone posted that question. This is a question for Marc, Andrew, and Laila. What can we see you in next? What's next? And maybe Andrew, if you want to start, where will we be able to see you?
Fortunately, I don't know how I got this lucky during COVID, but I actually just booked one of the lead series regulars on an upcoming ABC show called Triage. So somehow during quarantine, I've been lucky enough to book work, and so I'm off to LA soon, and I think that will. If that all moves forward, it will come out in March. And then after this film, A Call to Spy, I was lucky enough to do 3 other films, which are coming out next year and the year after. I don't know where. I'm not really privy to that information, but that's me. So again, I'm really just kind of starting out. But again, just really lucky to be busy during quarantine when I know a lot of people are, especially actors, really, really struggling. So knock on wood. Keeping busy.
Well, good. Mark?
Well, I went on to shoot Men in the High Castle. You can watch it on Amazon, season 4, which is a beautiful twist. You see, I don't want to spoil anything. And I shot an indie film, a feature film that's called Saturn, right before the pandemic hit. I don't know how far they are in the process of editing or when it's going to get released. And if you speak German, I'm shooting a German project right now that's called Breisgau, or you learn German, But life is too short to learn German, so that's what I've been doing.
Okay, thank you. And Laila?
I'll watch it. I have a little German. I'll watch it in German. I'm continuing. Actually, I'm continuing my recurring role on The Blacklist, where I play a Russian spy, Katarina Rostova. In fact, tomorrow I have to speak Russian, and I have been pounding that all week to get it into my head. And I'm also, you can see me on Amazon's The Boys. They released season 2 not too long ago.
You were awesome.
What?
You were awesome. What an entertaining show. I saw you and I got really excited because I was like, oh my God, there she is.
The Boys. I'm sort of the Charlie and Charlie's Angel, but it's a sex switch there. And then I'm doing a miniseries called Dr. Death, which is going to be fascinating, about a surgeon, Dr. Dunch, a true story of a spinal surgeon in Texas who maimed and or killed about 30 people. And I'm playing the CEO of the hospital. So we'll be starting that miniseries soon. So I'm very, as Andrew said, I feel very fortunate. It's been, 7 months of nothingness. And now some things are coming along. And I'm just grateful that they all didn't happen at once. Yeah.
Well, we wish all of you, the best in the future.
I do have a question.
Yes, Andrew.
Am I allowed to ask questions to people?
Yes, you are. Absolutely.
I was going to post it, but I realized I could just ask. So this question from Andrew is to Sarah. And, this is something I'm personally interested in. You had to wear so many hats from the beginning of this project to the end, from writer to actor to producer. And watching you on set, having to switch hats, you go from being producer and you're showing investors around the set, and then all of a sudden we're shooting a scene, and then you got to click in this limp, and then get back into the world of being in France during this time, and then switching back and watching playback, and then just talking to Lydia, and then doing notes on the script. I mean, it was absolutely nonstop switching caps, and I would just love to kind of hear your experience, what you learned from that, what you struggled from that, and kind of what you would kind of give others who may want to do that.
Sure. I love that question, Andrew. Well, first of all, I think it's really important when you take on so many hats to have an amazing team behind you, from Lydia to the entire cast and crew who's supportive of it, because even the investors, that everyone's on board you doing those roles and happy about you doing those roles, and also supporting you doing those roles. And I feel like we had that on this movie. In terms of the practicals day to day, this was my 3rd time doing it, so I had a little bit of experience. And I think what was really helpful is, and I learned each film, is knowing how and where to delegate, and how and where to say, I need this time for this role. So whether it was me and Stana up in a side room going through the script because she wanted to work on some lines and do some line tweaks and saying, okay, that's that hour, but then after that hour, I have to do something else, and really giving her that time. Or, right before going in to play Virginia Hall, I'd ask Lydia for 5 or 10 minutes. And, we didn't have trailers on this movie. All the actors had to do their prep in corners. So thank you guys. But you go into the corner of a room or whatever, and I would listen to Churchill's war speeches, and the combination, the same ones, like the same 3. And just the combination of listening to that and putting the leg on, was very helpful. Writing and producing are very much in your head, and you have to plan ahead, and acting, as you know very well, is in the moment. So just knowing when to take those hats off, but then having the team around you that's willing to support, even the investors. I update them to this day every other week. And when I was shooting, I said, you're not going to get any updates. I brought on board my sister, and my sister's going to send you the updates I give her, and don't bug me for 6 weeks. And they didn't. So again, it's about knowing when which hat needs the priority, maybe is.
Thank you. Sandra, do you want to take it from here?
Yeah, well, that was just amazing. Thank you so much to everybody. And thank you especially to Tamar Simon from Mean Streets Management and IFC Films for bringing you to our homes like this. I mean, what an opportunity. It's just been wonderful. I do have to ask one more question. My husband's an orthopedic surgeon. And Sarah, he wants to know how you hid the leg during the filming. For our final question.
We did that all kinds of ways. One way, we had someone come and build a prosthesis, you know, as a special effects type thing, with my leg out of plaster. And then like in the scene with Noor, in the bedroom scene, like my foot's in the bed. Yeah. And then there's like a fake knee here. Or we did have one special effect, like I put on, like, there was a running scene and I put on a real wooden leg, and like I tuck my leg behind that leg, like that. Can you see that? Yeah. And then we had to have a special effect kind of paint out my real leg. But many different ways. The magic of filmmaking.
Yes, the magic.
That's the magic of filmmaking. And I have another comment here that Robbie Weinman wants me to mention A Woman of No Importance by Sonia Purnell, an excellent biography of Virginia Hall, her early life and her participation in the resistance. So that's mentioned in the chat there. Again, I don't know how to thank you for this experience. If you haven't seen the film, I'm sure that you're going to go see it now. You can, you know, stream it on your favorite streaming service. And best of luck to all of you, to the film. And John, thank you for leading such a informative and inspirational session for all of us here. Thanks to everybody in South Carolina, Georgia, North Carolina that tuned in for this. Tamar, do you have any parting words you want to say? If you're still here.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. Thanks everyone for joining today. Thank you really to Sandra and all the sponsors, so many amazing partner film festivals and organizations. And yeah, you can check out the movie. You can go to the website, it's calltospymovie.com, and everything's on there. But really, thank you so much. And thank you to Professor Bruns for leading this amazing, amazing talk. Thank you guys. And stay safe.
Stay safe, everybody, and tune in for future events.